The problem with Dr. Voltra was that she refused to behave like a sensible owner. Rose spent nearly 2 months attempting to identify the purpose she had been purchased for and emerged from the effort more confused than when she started. Every slave existed to perform a function. The collective built entire industries around that principle. Ownership implied purpose. Purpose implied labor. Labor justified investment. The logic was simple enough that even children understood it. Yet every time Rose examined her own situation, the conclusion became harder to find. The work itself was not unpleasant. That only made it stranger. Most mornings began the same way. Rose would arrive at Voltra's office shortly after sunrise and discover the doctor already engaged in battle with a report, an administrator, or a piece of paperwork unfortunate enough to cross her path. From there, the day unfolded in a pattern that had become surprisingly familiar. Rose carried records while Voltra reviewed them. Rose delivered messages while Voltra wrote them. Rose organized schedules while Voltra ignored them. By evening, a remarkable amount of work had somehow been completed, despite the fact that neither woman seemed particularly interested in administration. The assignments changed constantly, but they all shared a common feature. None of them justified the price Voltra had paid for her. That fact became increasingly difficult to ignore once Rose started paying attention to the rest of the hospital. Maintenance crews spent their days hauling equipment through service tunnels. Sanitation teams worked longer hours than almost anyone else in the facility. Kitchen staff prepared meals for hundreds of patients and employees every day. Transport workers moved supplies from one end of the hospital to the other, from dawn until dusk. Every slave Rose encountered possessed a clearly defined role. They knew why they had been purchased. They knew what labor they were expected to perform. Rose, meanwhile, spent a surprising amount of time carrying a tablet while Dr. Voltra explained to various departments why they were incompetent. The strange part was that Voltra appeared completely satisfied with the arrangement. Rose had expected additional responsibilities as soon as her recovery ended. Instead, the work remained light. If anything, Voltra seemed more interested in keeping Rose nearby than assigning her difficult tasks. A simple request to organize several reports gradually became a responsibility for an entire filing system. A single reminder regarding an appointment somehow evolved into maintaining portions of the doctor's schedule. One successful inventory review led to another, then another, until Rose found herself regularly checking supply requests before they reached Voltra's desk. Every assignment made sense individually. Together, they created an increasingly uncomfortable question. Was Voltra actually finding work for Rose? Or was she finding reasons to keep Rose around? The question followed her through the hospital one afternoon while she accompanied Voltra during patient rounds. The doctor moved through the corridors with the same relentless confidence she brought to surgery, administration, and arguments. Nurses stepped aside when she approached. Administrators developed a sudden interest in distant hallways. Patients either looked relieved to see her or terrified, occasionally both. Rose walked beside her, carrying a collection of reports, while Voltra reviewed medical scans projected above a tablet. The silence between them lasted several minutes, which would have been uncomfortable months ago. Now it felt natural. Rose wasn't entirely sure when that had happened. Voltra suddenly stopped walking. Several employees changed direction immediately and disappeared around a nearby corner. Rose had noticed that hospital staff possessed an almost supernatural ability to detect incoming irritation. The doctor hissed softly and rotated the tablet toward her.
Explain this.
Rose examined the display. It appeared to be a routine inventory request. The quantities were correct. The department information was correct. The approval signatures were correct. Nothing seemed unusual until she reached the date. The supplies had apparently been delivered yesterday. The request authorizing their delivery had apparently been submitted tomorrow. Rose stared at the form for several seconds before looking back up. Voltra stared back with the expression of someone personally betrayed by chronology. The absurdity of the situation caught Rose completely off guard. Months ago, she would have lowered her gaze immediately and apologized for something. Now she found herself fighting back laughter. Voltra noticed at once.
Do not encourage them,
Said, pointing at the request as though the paperwork itself were responsible.
If employees discover temporal paradoxes are acceptable administrative practice, we'll never restore order.
Rose pressed her lips together while Voltra continued glaring at the display. The doctor looked genuinely offended by the existence of impossible paperwork. That, somehow, made the situation worse. By the time they resumed walking, Rose had managed to regain control of herself. Voltra, meanwhile, appeared to have added the form to a growing list of personal enemies. The rest of the afternoon passed much as most afternoons did. Reports were delivered, meetings were attended, questions were answered. At one point, Rose corrected a scheduling conflict before it became a problem. At another, she located a set of records that an entire department had somehow misplaced. None of the tasks were particularly difficult. What bothered her was how naturally they fit together. She no longer needed instructions from any of them. She knew where Voltra preferred reports to be organized. She knew which meetings mattered and which existed solely to waste time. She knew which administrators would require additional documentation and which would immediately lose whatever they were given. Somewhere along the way, she had stopped learning her duties and started anticipating them. That realization followed her through the day. Reader. A knock at the door interrupted the thought. Vexa entered carrying a tablet beneath one arm and immediately noticed the collection of schedules spread across Voltra's desk. The nurse had developed an unfortunate talent for identifying problems before anyone explained them. Rose watched her eyes move across the documents, then toward the thoughtful expression she had apparently been wearing all evening. Understanding appeared almost instantly.
You've been thinking again.
Said. Rose looked down at the schedules.
I don't understand why Dr. Voltra purchased me.
The nurse sat across from her without hesitation. The answer clearly wasn't surprising. If anything, Vexa looked as though she had been expecting the question for weeks. Rose explained anyway. She described the work, the responsibilities, the increasingly strange feeling that her position didn't quite make sense. By the time she finished, the nurse was studying her with an expression somewhere between sympathy and amusement. Neither reaction improved Rose's confidence.
Rose,
Vexa said carefully.
have you considered that Dr. Voltra might simply like having you around?
The suggestion landed with all the elegance of a medical transport crashing through a wall. Rose stared at her. Vexa stared back. Several seconds passed before Rose managed a response.
That isn't a reason to purchase a slave.
No,
Vexa agreed.
it isn't.
The nurse folded her arms and glanced toward the ceiling for a moment, as though searching for patience in a place she had previously misplaced it. When she looked back down, her expression had softened considerably.
You're trying to solve this like an accounting problem. That's the issue. You're looking for a labor category, a financial justification, or a productivity calculation that explains your place in her life. I don't think that's where the answer is.
Rose frowned. The explanation somehow made less sense than before. Vexa sighed.
Dr. Voltra structures her entire day around whatever she considers important. She always has. Surgery, research, patients, arguments, paperwork. If something matters to her, she makes room for it. Have you noticed how often you're included in her routine now?
Rose opened her mouth to answer and stopped. The realization arrived slowly enough to be unpleasant. Rose had spent weeks examining the work itself while ignoring the fact that she was present for almost all of Voltra's day. Not because she was required to be, not because anyone had ordered it, simply because that was how things had gradually developed.